Star Trek, the next generation's Enterprise, lacked one thing other enterprises are famous for: the USS Enterprise D of Star Trek. The next generation was missing one element that every other Starship Enterprise has had. Following the adventures of Captain Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart, and his Enterprise crew, TNG ushered in a new golden era of Star Trek that lasted throughout the 1990s. With crew members like LT, Worf, Michael Dorn, and LT. Commander Data, Brent Spiner, the crew of Captain Picard's Enterprise became almost as popular as that of Captain James T. Kirk, William Shatner. In both Star Trek, the original series, and Star Trek, The Next Generation, each main character had a specific role to play on their Starship Enterprise. Both ships, for example, had chief medical officers and chief engineers who were part of the main cast. But while the Enterprise of TOS had a dedicated helmsman in LT, Sulu, George Takei, the Enterprise D had a rotating cast of pilots. From Ensign Travis Mayweather, Anthony Montgomery on the Enterprise NX-1 to LT, Erica Ortegas, Melissa Navia on the Enterprise of Captain Christopher Pike, Anson Mount. Nearly every other version of Star Trek's most iconic ship has had a dedicated helmsman. Why Star Trek, The Next Generation's Enterprise didn't have a helmsman? When Star Trek, The Next Generation began, LT. Geordi LaForge, LeVar Burton, briefly served as the helmsman, while the chief engineer was portrayed by a rotating cast of characters. As the show progressed, it became apparent that a dedicated chief engineer made more sense as a series regular than a dedicated helmsman. Engineering problems arose more often on TNG than situations that required a strong pilot. Ensign Wesley Crusher, Will Wheaton, often served as the Enterprise D helmsman, but piloting a starship was likely mostly automated by the 24th century. After Will Wheaton left TNG, the helmsman position was filled by a rotating group of pilots, including Ensign Ro Laren, Michelle Forbes. TNG already had a full cast of compelling leads, and the role of helmsman was ultimately deemed less important than the other senior positions on the ship. Many of TNG's characters got to show off their piloting skills throughout the show's run, generally on shuttles or other small ships. Anytime the Enterprise needed to be piloted in battle or through a debris field, one of the senior officers took the helm, as they all had pilot training as well. In Star Trek, Picard Season 3, Admiral Jean-Luc Picard and Captain William Riker, Jonathan Frakes, commandeered the USS Titan A to rescue Dr. Beverly Crusher, Gates McFadden. Under the command of Captain Liam Shaw Todd Stashwick, the Titan was piloted by Ensign Sidney LaForge, Ashley Sharp Chestnut, the daughter of Geordi LaForge. Rather than following in her father's footsteps and pursuing an engineering career, Sidney had trained at Starfleet to be a pilot. After Picard and his Star Trek, the Next Generation crew saved the day on the rebuilt Enterprise D. Starfleet rechristened the Titan as the Enterprise G. With Captain 7 of 9, Jerry Ryan, in command, the Enterprise G became the latest iteration of the Enterprise to embark on a mission to explore the galaxy. Sidney LaForge remained on board as the helmsman, and Ensign Jack Crusher, Ed Spaliers, joined the crew as a special advisor to the captain. While Star Trek, The Next Generation's USS Enterprise D&E may not have had a dedicated helmsman, Sidney LaForge joins an impressive list of Star Trek pilots that began with Sulu back on Star Trek, the original series. When John Roddenberry envisioned Star Trek, The Next Generation, TNG, it was with the deliberate intention of building upon the legacy of the original Star Trek series while exploring uncharted territories, both literal and figurative. TNG's USS Enterprise D, under the command of the thoughtful and diplomatic Captain Jean-Luc Picard, became an iconic vessel in its own right. However, amidst the technological marvels, philosophical debates, and first contact scenarios, the Enterprise D lacked one thing that made other enterprises, particularly Captain Kirk's original Enterprise, so famous: a strong sense of adventure through direct physical peril. The original USS Enterprise, led by Captain James T. Kirk, became synonymous with daring, high-stakes missions that frequently involved high levels of personal danger. Kirk's style was all about diving headfirst into chaotic situations, battling Klingons, negotiating with godlike beings, or outwitting malicious AIs. Week after week, the original series, TOS, demonstrated a swashbuckling, action-oriented approach to exploration and conflict. While TNG's Enterprise D certainly encountered its fair share of battles and danger, its focus leaned more on cerebral solutions and moral dilemmas rather than the kinetic, action-packed tone that defined the original Star Trek. This shift in tone can be attributed to a few key factors. First, the thematic evolution of Star Trek between TOS and TNG reflected a more mature and optimistic view of humanity's future. Where Kirk and his crew often found themselves in situations that demanded brute force or quick thinking to escape, Picard's Enterprise was designed as a beacon of diplomacy and intellectual exploration. The Enterprise D was not just a starship. It was also a floating city, complete with families, schools, and recreational facilities. This change in environment contributed to a tone that emphasized safety and civilization over danger and frontier ruggedness. The composition of the senior crew aboard the Enterprise D also contributed to its lack of action-oriented flair. While Kirk's inner circle included the brash and resourceful Dr. McCoy and the combative, hot-headed Scotty, Picard surrounded himself with a team that reflected the show's cerebral nature. Commander Riker, though capable of Kirk-like daring when necessary, often acted as a more tempered leader. Counselor Deanna Troi provided an emotional and psychological lens to conflicts, often steering the crew away from immediate physical confrontations. Meanwhile, Data, the emotionless android, frequently solved problems through logic and technical brilliance rather than brute force. Together, the Enterprise D crew relied on strategy and debate rather than fists and phasers to solve their problems. The difference in storytelling approach was also apparent in the ship's design. The Constitution-class USS Enterprise from TOS was sleek and utilitarian, emphasizing its role as a military vessel as much as an exploratory one. The Galaxy-class Enterprise D, on the other hand, was significantly larger and designed with the comfort and long-term needs of its crew in mind. The inclusion of families on board added another layer of safety and precaution. Picard and his crew often made decisions that prioritized the well-being of civilians on board over risky heroics. The sheer size and scope of the ship emphasized its role as a community in space, rather than just an exploration or battle vessel. However, it would be a mistake to say the Enterprise D was without its moments of peril and adventure. Episodes like The Best of Both Worlds, where the Borg nearly assimilate humanity, or Yesterday's Enterprise, which thrust the crew into a wartime alternate timeline, demonstrate that the show was capable of high-stakes drama. Still, these scenarios often revolved around strategy, moral questions, and Picard's steadfast leadership rather than the swashbuckling bravado of Kirk's era. TNG episodes frequently ended with a sense of resolution or learning, where even violent encounters were treated as opportunities to grow or understand, rather than as pure action sequences. One area where this distinction is particularly evident is in the portrayal of alien encounters. In TOS, the Enterprise crew often found themselves in combat with hostile Klingons, Romulans, or various other menaces. In contrast, TNG's approach to alien civilizations was far more nuanced. While conflicts arose, they were frequently resolved through diplomacy, negotiation, or cultural exchange. The Klingons, once bitter enemies, became uneasy allies during TNG's run, largely thanks to the efforts of Picard and his crew to build bridges rather than burn them. In many ways, this lack of high-stakes, swashbuckling adventure contributed to the unique identity of Star Trek: The Next Generation. The Enterprise D wasn't a ship that barreled into danger, it was a ship that carefully navigated around it, seeking peaceful resolutions and prioritizing understanding over violence. While this made the show stand apart from its